I have with me today Marty Nelson. And Marty is a very, very important person in my life. He has been on the Council for Light Song for many, many years. And now in his life, he is actually the chief alchemist at an alchemy code lab, which is a coding school for computers. I'll have his contact information in the write up. So if you want to contact Marty about questions or maybe about his school, you are welcome to do that. But hi, Marty, how are you?
Hi, Jan. Great to be back on again.
Yes, we've done this a couple times, right? Last time was the jumping mouse, and
That's
was there,
right.
I think there was a time before that too. But anyway, it's wonderful to have you on. So we were talking, and I felt like it was really interesting that people understand that shamanism is not just journeying and working with the spirits in a formal sort of shamanic style, but you can integrate this into a lifestyle even as far as the it's seemingly opposite end of the spectrum, although I don't think it is, into coding, coding for computers.
Uh-huh.
And you've been an active shaman for many years now. I mean, how long have you been with Light Song and doing this work? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was, just coalescing some dates about things and realized that my software developer career and my training at Lightsong really started at the same point in my life, right at
Mhm.
the end of the last century, 1998, 1999. Um, and I hadn't made that connection until I was preparing
Yeah.
this, that those were so closely tied in terms of, the training on the job, becoming a better software developer, but also working with you and Lightsong and the community and developing in those practices as well.
Yeah, because you became a practitioner and a water pourer, and you really dove into the shamanic lifestyle there. You had a lodge on your land for a while, a sweat
That's
lodge,
right.
and yeah. So anyway, we thought, well, let's talk about how you're incorporating this into your into your work, into your software development. And one of the questions that we're talking about is for people in the business or the corporate world, what are some of the practical examples you've used to use traditional shamanic techniques to solve real world problems?
Right, right. Well, before I launch into that, let me give the listeners a little bit of my background in terms
Okay.
of the different roles that I have, because I think it really kind of frames things to understand the years that I went through. As I mentioned, I started about in 1999. I don't know if anybody remembers Y2K, and everybody
Oh,
was
yeah,
worried that
yeah.
the world would explode because the
Yeah.
computers only knew two-digit years, and that was my doorway in, and really worked as a developer. Till about 2005. And then I moved into a role where it was more of a development leadership role, had a team under me. And then by 2009, 2010, really helped manage a very large organization of almost 300 developers. We had 12 different products, globally distributed teams. And that was really a chance. We talk about being in both worlds. For me, that was being both in the technology world and the business world, and really being prized for the value that I brought about being able to walk in both those worlds and make that connection. I spent a few years doing startup stuff after that. And then in 2015, 2016, moved into teaching. And with my wife, Megan, opened a business, Alchemy Code Lab, where we've trained hundreds of people to be software developers.
So,
So want to give everybody that context. Some of the really practical things, that I think aren't really software development, but if you're managing teams, when I went to work for U.S. Bancorp Investments, this was in 2005. I joined a team, a struggling project that had been floundering for 2 years. Started, fell off, restarted. And so I came in and I did two things. First of all, I did a soul retrieval for the project. I was like,
nice.
this is energetically, it needs its power back, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to tell anybody that was just something I did. But I did also retrieve a power animal for the team. I find that people from most backgrounds get pretty excited when you're like, hey, I have an animal, and you don't have to go too deep into it. And, within 6 months, we delivered on that project
Yeah.
and pulled everything together. So you can, Jan, you always teach like everything has a spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just us that can lose power. You start to feel it. You realize, wow, there's not a lot of energy here. This thing feels dead or feels low energy.
Mm-hmm.
And you can work on those things. You can use the same exact techniques that you teach at Light Song
Mm-hmm.
to address those things and begin to shift the energy. And I think I actually think it's gotten more easier to talk about shamanism, energy medicine than it was 2 decades ago. The
Yes.
world is opening up.
Mm-hmm.
But you might still find yourself in places where at your work, it's just not really comfortable to go there, but you don't need to tell people what you're doing a lot of the time. You can just do your energy work and work with it and, really bring those in and focus on, it's a healing.
Mm-hmm.
You take something that's in dis-ease, whether it's the project, which is usually reflected in the people too, right? They don't feel good working in it.
Mm-hmm.
And you shift that using these techniques.
That's wonderful, Marty. And I just taught the second half of a soul retrieval class this last weekend, and we were talking just about that, how everything has a spirit, and you're not necessarily doing the work on the people, but doing it on the organization shifts the energy of the people, just the same as if you were to have a personal soul retrieval yourself, the people around you seem to shift because your energy is now different. And yes, you could do extractions and you could do filling with different life force energies as well as its own soul. And the idea that everything has a spirit or a soul is that anything that is created has a life force to it, and that would be determined as its soul. And so I love that. Do you mind sharing what your power animal was, or is that something that you want to?
It was a wolf for
It
this
was a
team.
wolf. Okay.
But I've done it. I belong to it's because I own my business now. It's kind of like an executive coaching gym where I have a support group and we meet once a week, and was able to get close enough to that following one of our sessions, I did power animal retrievals for all of my peers in that group.
Uh-huh.
And really watching them, some of them take that power animal and run with it. One
Uh-huh.
was a black jaguar
Yeah.
and I'd gotten myself one too, a kudo. And you can solve specific things that you need. Like I was looking for, I want to be a better manager. How do I manage people? And with a shamanic point of view, you don't have to go it alone. You can say, I want a guide. I want a power animal for this job. And that's what they love to do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's another example of, and again, I think power animals are a great kind of gateway,
Yes.
thing into
Yes.
it, because
Yes.
most people, I mean, look how much time we spend watching cats and dogs on the internet,
I
right?
know. And I have found the most uninformed people, as far as shamanism is concerned, love to get a power animal. And I was
Mm-hmm.
wondering if then the team, if it was a wolf, did you guys bring in pictures of wolves, or did you have like a
Exactly. Yeah.
icon
Yeah. I think I
create?
brought one in and yeah. Yeah. Everybody kind of adopted it. I remember walking in and someone on the whiteboard had drawn a little wolf face on there. And
That's absolutely great. That's really
yeah.
great. Well, very good. And so, was there anything else that you wanted to kind of look at as far as that one thing of bringing in how you solve problems? Other ways with using power animals or soul retrievals, anything like that that you felt was.
Well, I think more recently, as I've become business owners and also integrating in a lot of the information, Jan, that you've brought in with reality shifting.
Mm-hmm.
Those two things, I don't see the business and myself as being separate as I used to when I was younger. And it's like, they're kind of all part of reflections of the same thing.
Uh-huh.
And if I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the reality shifting work, but I've used that quite a bit in service of what I feel qualities I need for what's going on in the business.
Mm-hmm.
So recently it was like, there was like some student problems in it, and just normal stuff. But the energy, like I felt like, as we often do, like, wow, my skills aren't where I'd like them to be. You know, there's nothing like owning a business to show you where you're weak and where you need to grow. But
Uh-huh.
instead of like getting down or like, oh, I have to do this thing, you know, I went and said, I'd like to merge with a version of myself that
Nice.
already knows how to do this, that's already an expert in this leadership quality. So it's become something, I probably do it 2 or 3 times a week of, you know, what do I need to be of service to my business and my team? And then I go shift into realities where I already have those qualities. So it's a really just turbocharged technique, Jan, that I'm so grateful you've brought in through the practicum work and other places.
Yeah. Yeah.
That I think is really accessible and helps us to really realize how malleable we are, and we can set our own intentions.
Yeah, and Marty, I will say through the years, you've always been one of those. You have a brilliant mind, and instead of keeping it all in one category, you take these things and you branch out and you say, how can I apply these skills in all different phases of my life? And so, of course, there's a version of all of us that is extremely successful in whatever it is that we're trying to do. If it's a business or if it's a skill, a talent that you're trying to develop, there is that version of you that already exists that is mastery at it. And the more you practice those types of things, of incorporating that version of you, and usually through guided imagery, is that what you use, Marty, or are you journeying, or what style are you using?
Yeah, it's definitely a journey technique. It's a combination of, you know, going into the realm of all positive possibilities, merging, coming back. And then I couple that with internal work of journeying inside myself. What do I remove, this obstacle resistance that is going to allow this merge version to fully come in? Like, what do I need to let go of so it can really anchor in? And then I'll usually sometimes will add the Hawaiian Ho'onoponopono ceremony, which is a great, you know, sometimes when you're healing yourself, you realize, wow, I need to apologize to myself and love myself and thank myself and forgive myself.
Mhm.
So those three techniques together really form the basis of what I've been doing in that area.
That's beautiful. Really, very, very good. I love to hear that. It's great.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, you were mentioning something else that you always say, Jan, is you know, you're not responsible for the solution. Like, we set the intention and let spirit do it.
Hmm.
And in some ways, you know, you were saying I connect all these things, but a lot of it is because I let go of a lot of things, right? I'm not trying to control them. And it's hard when you have, you know, if in your life you have three things and you can say, you know what, those are one thing. It
Yeah.
actually simplifies things.
Yes, it does. It really does. And just to kind of fill in the listeners, if this is somebody's first time tuning in, the idea behind that is the spirits have said to me, uh, you're not in charge of the solutions. We can do the solutions. Our range of solutions is so much greater and bigger, even larger than your imagination can expand to. But your job is to hold the energy, meaning being the vibration that can receive that solution, which is usually that of happiness and joy and feeling appreciative and thankful. And when we take the time to, as you're saying, move into this different version of self and then be really excited about it, that then is a perfect match for those solutions then to come through. It's
That's
amazing
right.
how it
And you
works.
have to be open to that solution. I think a lot of times I remember when I was younger, that segmentation of our lives, were closed to a solution. Like, we
Yes.
believe that it's a work problem and we're stuck on the physical level, maybe the emotional level,
Mm-hmm.
and we can't get the solution in because our belief system says this isn't a spirit problem. You know, this
Right.
isn't something spirit can help me with.
Yeah,
And
that's
by
right.
using the shamanic viewpoint, that's really also what's going on, is you're saying it's all connected.
It's all
Spirit can help me with any problem.
with any problem, right? And it's all spirit. Everything has a spiritual component to it because we're spiritual beings, and so is everything else. And that's wonderful. I love it. Just love it. This is great, Marty. You've got all kinds of tips for people.
Yeah.
So has being a business owner like really changed your energy work too? I mean, I know that the energy work has changed your thing of being a business owner, but has it worked vice versa of being an owner in the way you
Yeah,
look at things?
I think I was mentioning that, but just to reiterate, when you're in that kind of situation, you don't see as much. When I was an employee, you're like part of a team, but there's still like a work-life separation.
Mhm.
But when you're the owner, like even though it's a whole team, there's no difference. I mean, I've noticed like seasonal depression going down and like sales go down.
Oh,
My own state energetically where I am will be reflected in the business and vice versa.
yeah.
So I think if people are going that route of starting a small business, being an entrepreneur, you really have to prioritize a level of self-care and self-awareness because they're not separate. They're much closer than I think when you have a job and you can get really into it, but there's not that kind of immediacy between
Mhm.
yourself and your business.
Yeah. And I've watched people too, especially that are trying to start new businesses or are business owners, that their worry can get in the way. Their worry of sales or whatever it is that they're trying to produce. And one of the things that I have repeatedly said is you can't trick energy. And so when you're really worried, even though you're putting on this happy air or everything's fine air, but the real vibration coming off of you is, oh no, worry, then you need to go in and find where that's amiss inside of you and truly trust the process, because spirit has your back, and we want to learn that, and you will benefit all the way around so much more when you kind of just trust and go for the gusto with everything.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And it's gonna and you've got to bring a lot of forgiveness, support, and realize it's a healing journey. It's not. I think it's so easy to get caught up in perfectionism
Yeah.
in our society,
Yeah.
and ultimately, if you can be grateful, like, wow, I went inside, I did this work. I realized I had this belief growing up about whatever that's causing me to worry, to give thanks. I think that's the other big shift in being a business owner is it's accelerated my personal growth,
Hmm.
because it's pushed so many of my buttons.
Hmm.
It's kind of that really revealing areas that I'm being dysfunctional in, or like that energy pattern's not working for me anymore.
Right. Exactly. And you're traditionally in the software development. And what might people not realize how software development, how it relates to shamanic journey work? I mean, they seem like they're at two opposite ends of the spectrum of an IT type of thing, which would be, very left brain type of thing. And then we have shamanic journey work, which would be very right brain. How do they complement each other, or how are they the same for you?
Yeah, and I don't know that everyone practicing software development does it like I do, but I do think that a lot of the elements are there. So for people not in software development, it's we write code, but the code is the result of a process.
Mm-hmm.
And most software development jobs, you're actually solving human-centered problems using a technology.
Mm-hmm.
So I might be coding something, but I'm imagining a user who's using that thing. So I'm pre-creating, like envisioning in my mind what they're doing. I'm, thinking about what I've learned from my business colleagues in terms of what's the situation. When I used to work for a company that did a lot of scientific innovation software, and I was working on an electronic lab notebook, and I'm like, oh, this is the discovery chemist. They're identifying new compounds. This is the formulator who's trying to figure out how do we scale and produce this drug. Uh, and you're thinking about the constraints of the technology. What can we do? And so you're holding all of this in your brain, and you're on a journey basically. And what I've realized is that the same way when we go into a journey that we trust, we intuit, we follow the energy, that's actually what you're doing when you're creating software solutions. You're taking all of these factors, and I just don't think that we could just mentally hold all those. So I really feel like you're in a space where you're going into these things. And in fact, Jen, I was going to ask you about this. There was a technique I learned from you where we went into like a space or container to work on problems and like fix them. It was like a little studio where we could go in. I think that was a level 3 or 4 thing that we did, but it's a lot like that. And that's where you're kind of, we say it's the brain, but I think because we're engaging these things, how do people feel that we've left our physical body to some degree, and we're in this journey of, it's kind of just like all positive possibilities. We're trying to find that creative solution in software development. And you get that like, aha, you receive information, things all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, this, it's revealed to you in the journey of your mind while you're crafting this thing, and you ground it in. It's just like a technique where you might journal or speak into a microphone. You're capturing the information. So there's a saying in software development, like the code is the documentation of how you figured out how to solve the problem.
Wow.
And software is like, if you really think about what we do, it's like crazier than Harry Potter. I tell our students, we write poems and we put them in the cloud and we feed them electricity, and they build economies, they inspire people, they motivate change. Like I think software is the closest thing to instant manifestation that we have. Like all I did was write words in a text file, and then all of a sudden people use it and we think it's real. It is real, I guess, but it's not corporal,
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Would it be appropriate to say that you actually envision an avatar as your client and what their needs are? Would it be like a virtual reality where you're seeing this avatar moving around and having these needs, like that type of a thing? That's how I was thinking of it when you were talking.
Yeah, I mean, it's you do feel like you've journeyed to a point in time where you've gone to the future where they're using the software.
That is so cool.
And you're like, you're watching it, but you're actively changing it too. You're like, no, they're not knowing what to press there. So let's do this. And you're picking up, what you perceive as how they might feel about what they need to do. And when you get really good at it, you're also like, oh, what would make them excited? What would bring them joy using the software? How could you be like, oh, that was easy, for them to do a thing with software. And so that's a lot of it. One of the other techniques I think that is really applicable, I believe it was the level 4 class where you taught about the different levels of energies, like physical, emotional, and you get up higher and things become less distinct and more connected. But you said something there that stuck with me. It's that often you can't find the solution to a problem at the same level at which it was created. And that happens in software development, where sometimes you're trying to do a feature and it just doesn't feel right, or you can't quite get it to fit, and you take it to a higher level. What I mean by that is you go back to your business colleagues, other people, and you say, you said you wanted this, but I was thinking that what we really want to do and what we're trying to achieve is this. So what do you think about if instead of this thing, we did this other thing over here that would be easier for us and probably be better for the user? And so really good software developers know how to move from I'm down here trying to make the computer do this thing. That's the physical level of it, some code that does something. But you're like, I can alleviate the need for this thing even to exist or modify what it is by coming way up here to like, what are we trying to achieve? Again, what's our intention as a business for this software? And can we all agree that actually we thought we wanted this thing over here, but we really just need this? And it reminded me of when the team I was talking about, where we got the power animal. I remember it really distinctly because I was really proud of the team where we had a feature. It was some sort of data that we had to move, and we thought it'd be a 2-week thing. And we had this conversation together, and the developer suddenly realized that, we could just do this. And, it became a half-day task,
Yeah.
right? Not because we were clever or smarter, but because we took it to a different level and avoided doing something that didn't need to be done.
So what you're saying is fascinating, and I will say that that thing that you remember is actually somebody else's kind of famous quote. I don't remember who it was, but it was like Einstein or somebody like that that said, you can't solve a problem at the same level, or you can't have a solution at the same level of the problem. I don't remember who said it, but it wasn't my quote for sure. However, I do believe that. And I'm wondering if we could put this in a little bit more of a practical sense for people in how you would go about doing that. I know in class, we literally envision ourselves moving up to a higher level, almost like in an elevator, moving up. And now we're going to look at this problem or look at this thing from up here. And it has a completely different landscape. Those issues,
Exactly.
hardships are just not there. But all these other beautiful factors of maybe why it exists and what its intent was to exist are all sort of revealed. For a layperson or for somebody that's a business owner like yourself, how would you recommend that they could get really good results by doing these techniques and possibly, not having the background in journeying and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I do think that there is a level of feeling involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can generalize that anytime you're working with a problem and it feels dense, it
Mm-hmm.
feels heavy, it's like anything you're thinking of or trying to apply, it just doesn't move a lot,
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can all kind of identify when we're banging our head against something and it's so heavy, it's not going to move.
Mm-hmm.
And I think using that as your trigger to be aware, then go back to your intentions. I think if you're not, that's the idea of going up, re-clarify like what is it I'm trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully people listening to podcasts too have a mission, that are like, I'm doing this because I want to provide value to this person or these types of people or the planet. So I think just going back to your attention, reconnecting with the real thing that's motivating you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really simple step, but I think just doing that, and maybe doing some breathing
Yeah.
until you feel a lightness. Because if you reconnect with your intention and mission, you're going to tap into the excitement, right?
Right.
And just be open at that point to different ways that you could think about the problem.
I know that a lot of very famous inventors, Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, ones like that, were avid meditators. And they often, when they were working on anything from a math problem to a detailed issue in some sort of invention, would move into a meditation, which is sort of the same deal, where you're letting go of what that issue is. You're stilling your mind, and it's like you're opening doors for insight to come in because you're not so locked into the issue. And so all of these things I think are phenomenal. I mean, as you're talking about this, I'm like, wow, and I do believe that that is basically an inventive mind. Every invention had to break out of some sort of parameter on what was to bring in some sort of new information. And there had to be some sort of technique. Lots of times things come in your dreams, or they come in the shower when you're taking a shower, and supposedly, water has these negative ions that stimulate creative thought. But you're not dwelling on the problem, is what I hear. You're not, like pounding on it and trying to figure it out. You're letting it go for a moment, taking a break, moving into some sort of greater self awareness, like you said, through breathing or stilling, or, just relaxing on some level, and boom. With the intention that you're trying to be open to those things, I think brings it through.
Yeah, definitely. And even if maybe people aren't fully aware of shamanism, I think energy of the East or eagle, like, is another. So people, since we just said people love animals, imagine you're an eagle that's rising above and seeing the big picture.
Right.
But you're down on the ground, you're too close, and you've got to let go. And now we're going back to like, let spirit come in to help you with the solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's great, Marty. I love it. I love it. Um, what other, like, I don't know if we're repeating here. You had submitted some questions, but I wanted to make sure that I brought these to full circle for you. But you're teaching new people to become software developers. And what other insights have you gained through Lightsong training that helps you translate this into advice for training these new developers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of them is the training of the telepathic practicum, and I'll explain that. But seeing new people come in, it's been very eye-opening because I can see where they get blocked. I've been doing it for 20 years. It's like when you're the fish, you can't see the water. Saying, right? And for those who aren't familiar, for me, the skills there, maintaining focus, not being distracted. But one of the big lessons is it's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
And learning that depersonalization, I call it, that you are an empowered agent, and that not being about you is actually liberating. I think our ego is like, but it is about me, but once it's not about us, it's like, I don't need to listen to egoic reactions. Okay. So new people, as an example, when they start coding, we actually have like different we call them anti-patterns. They're like common things people do. And one of them is they'll have a problem and they go into what I call pleading their case. But I typed the right things. I did this. And it's a very egoic story about the righteousness, and they're being wronged by this computer. And teaching them that it doesn't really matter. The computer is not going to be swayed to behave differently because of your plea that you did the right things. And you need to shift into just paying attention and seeing, what assumption do I have is wrong? What information is right here in front of me? New people will be like, oh my God, it's not working. And we're like, well, did you read the error message? And so I think that kind of shamanic training, when we depersonalize, we've talked about, let spirit be the solution and all these things, but that takes amount of personal development. It can also be, Eckhart Tolle and Zen Buddhism and are saying the same thing about presence, right? But that skill is really critical for being a software developer, because it doesn't really matter. It's not about you.
Yeah.
Your code is not you, and you're just a shepherd of that code, and you need to really pay attention to what's going on. And I really found a lot of for me at least, the practicum skills were just such a great example or training ground to develop that ability to instantly just be like, oh no, it's not about me, and just let it go right away. In a context, a practicum, or I'm doing my software developer. I don't need to do this, tell this story about this thing anymore.
That's good. And not everybody, of course, knows about the practicum, but that is one of the sort of mantras that we tell to people because people personalize things. And when something happens, when it either goes right or goes wrong, it's all personalized. And it's like, it's not about you. It's the
Exactly. Yeah.
unfolding of this thing. We like to claim the good stuff and get rid of the bad, but really none of it is about you. It's just this unfolding process of the way that energy is working, and everything is unfolding just as it should, and we're learning and growing, and yeah. So that's
Yeah.
beautiful. I love the way that you apply these things.
Yeah. I'd say another one is that most people are not accustomed to like outcome first or intention, if we're in shaman, kind of processes.
Mm-hmm.
That they come in and it's like, well, I have to do all these things to get here. Whereas the shamanic way is more, you were talking about it, envision the thing that you're going to create and allow spirit to come into it. In fact, there's a software development technique called test-driven development.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole approach in that is that you write a test to use code that you haven't written yet. And you're asserting like, this is what it should do.
Uh-huh.
And then it fails. And then you go make it happen.
Uh-huh.
And so it's a really advanced technique, or people that are more experienced, and people's brains just normally don't work that way. But for me, I think because of the shamanic work, it made total sense. It was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh
yeah.
yeah, we're gonna set the intention. We're gonna think about what it is that we're trying to do, and then let it come in.
Mm-hmm. That's You've mentioned that a few times in this conversation, as well as another terminology that we use for that is we're going to pre-create.
Recreate it. Yeah.
Pre-create it. We're going to pre-create it in our minds and through our intentions, and what we have, what the result is that we want, and then we sort of just move into that when we start building instead of just being random. And we can pre-create anything throughout the day. As soon as you open your eyes in the morning, you can say, my intention is to have a fabulous day.
Mm-hmm.
That puts an energy into motion that then is a trajectory for those things to start to happen. Or you can say, I'm going to pre-create going into this meeting that it's phenomenal, and the people love my ideas, da 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 da, and you're just sort of in this visions of grandeur of that in your daydreaming, so to speak, in your mind. And the chances of that happening then to follow that trajectory of motion that's already in place is very high.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so much different from just walking in and getting hit with the energy that's in the room, which might not have anything coalesced into some sort of, it's random, it's all scattered all over the place. Instead, you're coming in with this idea, it's in motion, and you bring it into the room, and then it takes dominance into that space. And, there's just so many techniques that you can apply to any situation, taking a test, a relationship. It's just all there. All these different things that we talk about in shamanism are applicable in all these different arenas. Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing that really helped me kind of going the other way, yeah, this TDD technique I was mentioning, back out to like pre-creation in general, is when you approach it, there's a like TDD, there's a sensation of like it front loads the hard work
Yeah.
of like, what do you really want, you
Uh-huh.
know?
Yeah.
And oftentimes people that are new to it will struggle and not do it because they also feel I'm not making progress, you
Mhm.
know? But if you stick with it, what happens is then you go to write the code and it actually just kind of flows in. I mean, literally we were talking about that because you're just responding to what you set up. It clarifies exactly what you wanted. And so I realized that coming back for non-coding things with pre-creation intention, it's tough work in terms of like you're on the, no one can tell you what you want, and you said energy doesn't lie, so that takes a certain commitment and effort on our part to do.
Mhm.
But then you do that hard work, and then it's like you're pointed downhill. There's this sense of fulfillment that follows that labor that we do.
Mhm. That's really fascinating. Have you thought about actually bringing shamanic training into your programs, like where you actually are using those terms and bringing in
We,
training?
our team has been. We hired an instructor recently who's a meditation teacher.
Uh-huh.
And so we're talking about, that's another nice gateway thing. Most people these days are fine with meditation. But I am curious whether, if we had people do journey down the rabbit holes, if that, because now I believe, looking back at my career, that the practice of journeying, and you always say we all can journey, but it's a muscle, right? You need to develop it. Of potentially, maybe we should start sending them to Light Song to do beginning journeying, to start tapping and leveraging those pieces of the brain, because of my own belief now that in software development, they're using the same muscles, many of the same muscles.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have become more and more explicit about, we also call it just personal development, or the things that you need to do to grow as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
To that end, and I could see us at some point being much more explicit, and in fact I think there's a market for that, of people who would find that very exciting, to have that sense of magic and wonderment of, yeah, I'm training at the shamanic software school.
That's great. Well, there was a book that came out a while ago called The Corporate Shaman, that
Mm-hmm.
people were bringing ideas into corporations, very much around team development and working cohesively with each other, and kind of like what you're saying, you have a power animal that sort of unifies you, and you can look at how that ally then influences your work, or
Mm-hmm.
the common dialogue that can start developing just around the magical qualities, instead of it being so linear. You can bring in that idea of magic, that things can be created without its normal sense of elements, like alchemy. You get
Mm-hmm.
gold out of lead. Well, those aren't the elements of lead, but yet here you have this new creation. And that name, is that why you chose that name, alchemy?
Yeah, we did. We really feel that that's what we offer for people, is it's a crucible for transformation.
Mm-hmm.
That it's it's their process. They have to be in charge of it, but we're there to provide the catalyst and information, to change them. And it's one of the funnest parts. I mean, we obviously like really impacting people's lives positively, but most people that go through the program, at least we hope that they grow as individuals for all these reasons that we've talked about. Software is very uncertain and ambiguous, and I see a lot of people take the things they're learning, and they do start to look at their lives like, oh, my life is uncertain and ambiguous, I'm not really in control of everything. And they just mature a little bit, because software development is a hard craft, and you have to depersonalize and get used to being wrong, and that's fine, or errors happening. That's a resiliency, that you have to learn to do that, and we see them go out and become better people as well.
Yeah. Inner self development is the key to really any craft, I believe, and to mature and to actualize and to really start seeing the bigger picture of yourself. That you're not just this developer, you're this being that is a creative being. And you have the power to create on all different kinds of levels. And that's what I hear mostly in your story, is that you're bringing out those concepts and those truths to people, and letting them get a feel for that in what it actually is, and having that be kind of glorified and upheld as a good thing to do instead of being, you know, like lots of times intuition has gotten a bad rap, because you can't so-called prove it. But if you intuitively are putting together this idea and then trying to then get the code to fit it, I believe I understood that correctly.
Yeah.
You have this
Yeah.
bigger overview. Then you're using that whole other half of your brain, which is the creative side. And that's what coding is. It's got to be the creative side to be able to bring in new ways that things work. And
That's right. Yeah, I was speaking with a student recently who was a dancer, and we were talking about that creative, intuitive thing that happens in a lot of areas, and how that was similar for her, that when she was a dancer, that she's feeling into the dance.
Mhm.
It's a whatever that part of it, that our innate knowing, right? We tap into that and we let it lead us to the creative solution. And that's the same thing we do in software. I really believe that there are very few problems that are logical, like most people expect in programming, because we're using the technology as a tool to be creative. It's the medium, it's not the thing itself.
Right.
And so you are very intuitive into it. You're feeling into it. Where can I find the solution?
That's great. So Marty, I think that what we're talking about is so inspirational, and I know that you put a lot of time and effort into thinking about what you wanted to say today and how to inspire folks. Is there anything else that well, let me first, before you answer that, let me tell people how to get a hold of you in case they are interested in the coding and some of the things that you do. So you're at alchemycodelab.com. That
That's
is
right.
your website. Or no, that is your email address. No, what is that,
Oh,
Marty?
Alchemy Code Lab, that's our school website, alchemycodelab.com.
Okay. And well, why don't you tell people how to get a hold of you? That would be the best way.
Yeah. Well, if someone wants to reach out to me directly via email, I'm Marty, Marty, at alchemycodelab.com. If you want to check out what our school's about, go to alchemycodelab.com. And I'm Marty PDX on most social media like Twitter, GitHub. That's where developers hang out, if you're not familiar with that.
Good. Very good. So again, going back to my last sort of question, what would be, you know, one of those things you just want to just call out and say, this is exciting because, and anything different from what we've been talking about?
Yeah. I mean, I would really encourage everyone to be in charge of your belief system and strive for the belief system that gets you most excited.
Mhm.
A lot of what I do is because I just kind of for let go of the existing barriers and dogma. And if you can dream it up, try it out, and do the thing. And whether it's software development or anything else, I think that these are really exciting times. I know there's a lot of difficulties and hardships, but we're so many opportunities to do new things as humans.
Yeah, boy.
And just engaging that passion, bringing spirit into whatever you're doing, and yeah, I think that's a good message.
Well, one of the things I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand is that belief systems are choices. And you can dream up a belief system. You can say, I'd like to believe this way. I would like this to be true. And as you are developing that, you're putting that is a creative energy that you're putting into motion, that you then get to live that truth. And I find that so you're not harnessed by anything, but you do need to spend some time looking and saying, what's blocking me? What is my belief around making money or career, or the difference between spirit and technology? If you can just kind of write those things out or talk to somebody about it where you're not just thinking about it. I think thoughts are too scrambled. You need to document them
Yeah.
somehow so you
Yeah.
can actually see what's going on. And you can see your blocks. Well, I think this sits over here and this sits over here. Well, if it's doing that, what happens? Well, there's separation then. Well, would it be okay if we blended them? Well, yeah. And you just kind of look at that and look at your belief system and why you're thinking that.
That's right. And I know for me, one of the big ahas was moving past, like, is my belief system, is this the right belief? Like somehow there was like is it valid or correct versus is this belief working for me?
Right. Is this belief working?
And belief creation is a creative act. And everything we've talked about this whole podcast, you can apply to that. And to me, that I think was one of the cornerstone pieces that came through a lot of my training is you have a choice. And it's almost daunting when you really tap into how much control we have from that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Marty. And I hope people that are especially interested in software would contact you. Or do you have an online program going on with your software?
Yeah, we've been all online since the start of the pandemic. We may be introducing some hybrid in-person things this fall as people really want to get back together in person, but it is an all online program at this point.
Wow, that's wonderful. So people can join in from any place around the world, basically.
Well, it's a live interactive class. So the time zone, can be if you want to work out off hours on the other side of the globe, but yeah, you can engage. It's all real people. It's help. It's not a program like a software program that you're interacting with. It's very people centered.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, I hope they get a hold of you. And for people that are just in the business world outside of software, I hope that there's been information here that you can apply to your own setting, whatever that is, or your own team of people that you're working with, whatever that is. Just get that team to get a power animal together.
Right.
That, just as a first step and see what happens. And then, of course, you're always welcome to contact the school at lightsong.net and see what we're offering in shamanic journey classes and say, oh, I'd like to apply this to my life. And those are always available. We have on demand that is constantly going. It's a self-paced group. And then, of course, we teach the different classes a couple times a year for those introductory classes. So thank you, Marty. As always, you just make me smile. I'm so glad that we had this time together and that you shared your brilliance. I mean, your genius with us. It really is quite creative.
Well, thank you, Jen. It's been wonderful to be on, and it's always great to talk with you because I can geek out on that stuff and you understand what I'm talking about. So I always appreciate that.
Of course, of course. Well, thank you, Marty, and we'll connect soon, I'm sure.
All right, take care.
Okay, you too.